Mountains are one of my favorite things to paint. They're big, they're grand, they have a lot of color, they have a lot of shapes and forms. I really like these chunky shapes and forms, and they have these natural compositions that they just they're just a thing of beauty, just a natural beauty. And they're one of my favorite things to paint. There's just so much I could just stare at them all day. They're beautiful, and I don't really have to explain myself, honestly. I want to show you how to draw them. Okay, so there are a variety of types of mountains, but generally they follow specific shapes and forms. There's basically two forms that you really see inside of mountains. There's these pyramids shape, and then there's these blocky shapes. So you kind of have these pointy mountains that have more of that pyramid-esque shape. It's not exactly the same. Or a triangular prism, and they aren't a perfect form or anything like a cube or a sphere or a cylinder, but they have these different edges to them that we try and identify. So there's different types of mountains. There's these fold mountains where the tectonic plates are kind of folding over each other, and that tends to be the most common one, kind of the majority of these mountains I have here. Then there are crust bending mountains. Or I'll pull up my chart. So there's the bending crust, or upward is where the crust is bending underneath, not exactly where the fault lines are pushing against each other. Some ways that causes the upward bending crust mountains are these dome mountains where there's magma pushing up and causing the earth to kind of bend upwards, but not quite breaking through. That would be a volcano, which is a different type of mountain where there's magma and hot gases and whatnot that comes out and do an explosion or an eruption, which are really cool if you can see one, but I don't know if you would want to be near one if it's happening. And then there's the fault block where the different faults or tectonic plates where they're moving up and down near each other. Death Valley is an example of that. And then there's plateau type mountains or erodent mountains, which are where basically the weather has beaten it down and then formed it into shapes. You can see that with this mountain here with the mesas, with these kind of chunky, squarish looking shapes. Is kind of where you would see that. Or there will be some old mountains that have just been beaten down and washed out. Like the Grand Canyon is probably a really cool one. I don't know if that really counts as a mountain, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to say that is. And then there are other ranges, like in Zion, which is where this photo up here is. And that is a really... I'm pretty sure this is a erosion or plateau type mountain where it's just been carved away from weather and rain and water and whatnot. And then there's volcanoes, which is where there's hot gases or molten rock, anything that's high temperature that's coming out of the Earth's core, and they pile up and get bigger and eventually have an explosion like this one here, an eruption. I think this one is Cotopaxi by Frederick Church. That's the painting. It's very pretty. This is one of my favorite paintings of his. So maybe I'll do a study of that when we get into color. There's a lot of color to break down here. And that's basically the different types of mountains there are. But really you need to understand the different forms that are within them. So we have these pyramid shapes, and then they kind of mush them together, and then you have these different mountain shapes, and they're not perfectly made because that's just how nature is. It's kind of a bunch of stuff put together, and then you put them together. There's these shapes within it, and you try and break them down, and it helps you kind of think through the three-dimensionality of it. They're unique shapes too, so you kind of have to take your best guess where you can find the edges, the planes of the mountains, where they're kind of like this side is a plane, the different sides, and you kind of have to find those shapes, and then some more can pop out of them, and you keep finding little shapes within the bigger ones. That's kind of all you really need to know for pretty much breaking down anything, but mountains tend to have these different forms within them. Okay, here's a study of the mountain. I did this earlier this month, and I'm quite happy with how the line drawing came out. I'm seeing issues looking back on it where I could have added a little bit more form. Honestly, if I just made my document or canvas size bigger and drawn it bigger, because this is drawn very small, it would have gone a lot better. So keep that in mind. And then I started to paint underneath, and I ended up with this. And that was my study. Some things to know: there's overlap, just adds more depth to it. There's shapes and forms. There's so much that goes into the mountains that I won't even be able to cover it all. And then I created my own using some of the information I learned. So there's forms that I already talked about. I noticed there's a zigzag pattern in this particular mountain range that I wanted to bring into some of my other drawings, into some of my, there's this zigzag pattern, kind of the water's flowing down and it's getting eroded. I kind of drew out some of the rocky shapes that I saw within this mountain. And something to keep in mind is there's atmosphere. I hope I spelled that right. Where things kind of get bluer the further you look into a mountain range, or really into nature in general, because that's just kind of, you're looking through particles or atoms. I guess maybe that's where atmosphere comes from. That you can't see them all together, but they layer and layer, and you're looking through different parts of the atmosphere in the air. And also you're getting some of that light bounce down from the sky as well. So here's a couple quick little sketches I did of some of my own mountains. I'm not sure which ones I'll do. I have studied other ones, so that kind of helped me be able to create these a little better. I'm liking this one right here. I think I will explore some more ideas with that. And let's see if we can create a mountain. Okay, let's do another breakdown. I have this mountain here, and I want to break down the shapes. I like that the lighting's coming in from here, because it's showing you where the shadows are, which shows the edges a lot easier. So, oops. Okay. So I just want to break down the bigger shapes. So this does come down like this, but I'm not going to draw that. And then there's this overall shape here. And then we have this. And it comes back like that. I don't know if we can see that so well, but there's some drawing it in red. And there's this piece here. It comes around like this. And then this mountain here. So those are kind of the overall outlines of the mountain. Now we're looking for the forms. So we have basically this. Well, now we need to find the lines in between there to find these faces. So we're just looking for those shapes. In some of the shadows, it's not as important to get those areas, but it definitely helps to try and understand how things are flowing together. Kind of some grooves there. This is kind of a shape here, here, like that. Here. More shapes, and then there's some overlap here. Some more shapes here. Okay, so you're kind of seeing it come together. This is tracing, but this is to understand what we're looking at. So there's kind of this ridge here, plane here. Wraps around here. You can see even more of the finer shapes here. Even if you just look at where the shadow is, you can see that there's this overall shape here. And this cast shadow down here. These are all shape here. Just draw some of these shadows because they really show you where the forms are changing. Where the light is hitting the one side, but it's not hitting this side. Grooves here. I'm not going to be getting every little detail, but I'm going to get... Okay, so there's actually a mountain behind here, which is actually... This is actually the top of this mountain. And then there's another one behind here. Actually, this might be two. Let's zoom in. So yeah, I'm seeing there's a peak right here, which you could get rid of that if you wanted to just make the composition a little more simplified, but I'm going to leave it in. And then there's this other mountain behind it. I don't want to get carried away with all the details. We're just looking at the overall form. The mountain. Okay. Here's kind of what I got. Oh, now I always see more. Alright, so this is what it looks like for me, just finding those different edges and faces. It kind of looks like a mountain. No, it's tracing, but there's stuff to be learned when you trace. Those are kind of what I see inside of there. There's some little extra line just to show some contour. And you kind of see which direction those planes are going. So kind of like that. Okay. And then some of these I just kind of have these triangular shapes make these nice. You see right where the ridges are when you get that. Alright, now what does this look like if we just drew it? Okay, so now those big shapes, we'll try and like block in those big shapes. I think this mountain here is definitely where we're focusing our eyes on. So that's like the focal point compositionally. That is what my eye is drawn to. And I like some of the shapes within there. Okay, so I'm trying to just draw the overall bigger shapes right now. So it's easy to get caught up on doing all the details as you're drawing. we just want to understand how all these parts, all these different parts of the mountain kind of fit together. And finding those edges that I traced over helps me kind of see where everything fits together. Okay, I'm getting carried away again here. So there's this. Did that peak? And then like this. And down and over. And then kind of up along here. I have a peak here. Then it swoops down. Draw kind of around this mountain. Where we want to focus most of our efforts on is there. And then it doesn't quite have everything in the frame. And this kind of domes down. Now I'm just going to kind of go through and speed this up. I'm drawing this in red. I probably should be drawing it in black or gray. But I'm already in this far, so do this. Gotta keep in mind where the shadows are, which can kind of make the forms kind of melt together a little bit. And sometimes that's okay, because that's just where the light's hitting. You can group the lights together that way, and it will still look alright. I actually might remove this part here just to make the composition fit a little more natural, or feel more natural, even though that's just how the bound actually is. I'm going to remove that part. It doesn't make too much of a difference in the overall image. Just keeping track of where all the parts are. If you're intimidated by drawing the mountains, you can always just practice drawing segments of them. Like maybe just zoom in on this section, but not too far, because you need to see those shapes in there. I do really like what I'm seeing here. And even now, after I kind of have the layout of it, it's still hard to capture it exactly. Even the lines that I already made. You just get better with this over time. Some days you're just gonna not be doing them as well either. I feel like today might be one of those days where I'm just not doing it as well. Oh, I forgot to draw in kind of this icy block. It looks like a glacier used to be here. Just following this pathway. There's another S-curve. Us painters love. And there you have it, the mountain range. But I want to add in some more of these details here. And that's kind of the gist of drawing a mountain. So I think I might do the painting part as well, at least the very beginning of it. Heck, I could even do a whole thing on just getting the color, studying colors. But mountains are mostly forms, and that's kind of the important part of them. So here's a mountain drawn in red, and there's more grooves and pieces that you see as you go into it. So, yeah, you know what? I'll make another layer, and I will put the color, just a quick rough in of color. Just color in the sky, briefly. Have some of the opacity turned down, which is okay. Let's color that in. Somewhere that's very light, it will definitely be a bit bluer. I'm just gonna fill in kind of these darker areas, And I'm just going to color in kind of around the same patterns that I drew out. And you can do this by just strictly doing color. I sometimes do it both ways. Sometimes I'll draw it out. Sometimes drawing it out can give you a better understanding of it. Probably going into the details a little too early, but I'm just gonna paint out these darker shapes. Definitely the mountain has snow on top, so it's gonna be just lighter in general, but still in the darker range. It's like about very similar to the sky color, just slightly darker. Let's see, what is this peak that I'm looking? What is this peak? Guess I added in an extra peak there by accident. Okay, let's move on to this part that's in the front a bit more. Yeah, I should have made the lines black, but I can go back and change that. Okay, let's come together. I want to try and just get rough color quickly. It's kind of what it roughly looks like so far. It's mostly just blue. Gray in here. Basically not even any color. And kind of this yellow, dark green. See, the green here is basically the same darkness as the shadow over here. But I'm picking the colors manually from this bar. There's all kinds of ways you could do it from the cube. Kind of find whatever way you like to do color with, but this is the way I like to do it with these sliders. A hue, saturation, and I think the B is for blackness. Even this green is still pretty light. Even then you'll see even more smaller shapes as you start doing the color and looking at those little different variations and stuff. This is completely gray. Like if I draw that, it looks kind of, there's some color in it. It almost looks kind of orangish, yellowish. Okay, so there is a little bit of orange in there. This is the best way to practice color, is to just kind of guess. Sometimes you can color pick to see if you're kind of in the right range. Like this is a lot darker than when I actually drew it, so I can just go back in and make it darker. I turned the opacity down slightly. Oh no, I didn't. And that will just give you more color variation. Try not to color pick the red. And you just paint over it. And there's kind of the rough start of a painting. Fill in some of this mountain. Because most of it's not white. Most of it's kind of a gray. And you can get rid of the lines and just kind of start painting. Because usually after I start painting, I get rid of the lines. And then I go in and start sculpting out this mountain pretty much. With light. With light and darks. And then bring up lines for just a little bit of context here. See, even here I'm getting hung up on some of these details. They aren't just two tones, there's some different shades in there as well. I'm trying to draw them simply for the demo portion. Okay, and that's basically how you draw and paint a mountain. The painting always takes the longest. I'm gonna speed this up. Maybe I'll use we'll talk about the other painting instead. Okay, it got a bit darker in here, but this is kind of the very beginning of a study. Sometimes they go faster, sometimes they take longer. This one took quite a bit of time. So far it's been about 45 minutes since I started the breakdown. Okay, I was gonna call it done, and I decided to work on it some more. And sometimes you just work on studies until you feel like you've learned a little bit of something from it. This one I've been working on for a couple days, coming back and working on it here and there, but I just decided I wanted to maybe just be done. But I'll show examples in just a minute. Just a few things I wanted to like say about this study because I should have, because you need to reflect on the stuff you do, and it's an important part of learning and growing with your art. So this one I did all in the round using the hard round brush. I used the pressure size, so depending on how hard you push, it could make it narrower or thicker. And I wanted to just use that to keep the study simple, even though it does bring up some challenges along the way. You need to have a goal for when you're going into a study. This one, I wanted to show how to draw them, and I think the drawing came out better than the actual painting. In the painting, a few things that I just thought about while doing it. It doesn't have to be exactly the same as the reference, but get it as close as you can and try and convey that depth to it. Like there's some part lacking on the right here, but just more time, you add more over time and try and build it up. But that's just a few things I wanted to add in because I just felt like I didn't show enough. And you can look at my other examples. If you think I should do some more, show how to do studies more, I will make another video on this. But this is just the general overall thing about mountains. I'm just going to pull up some other studies that I did. This one I did earlier. It's the other example that I did early on. Try and do it. And I had some that I did earlier this year. I'll just kind of go through them. So here's one, another one, another one. Some of them I use using the round brush for. This one I use more textured brushes. Really like this one. I just did a handful of them earlier this year. And obviously if you do more regularly, you will get better at them a lot faster. And then just a couple little tiny studies there. Another one, and yeah, that is basically how you paint mountains. I would like to do more like original mountains, but for now that covers it. So you want to do mountains and you want to make your own, just leave a comment below if you want to see more of that, and I will do a follow-up to it. But for now, that's basically what I got. And until next time, Dartagon out.